Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Purr Before Dying by T.C. Lotempio, narrated by Amy Rubinate. Chapter 1. I can't believe it! You're actually going to be cooking meals every day for 2 weeks for Preston McClintock! It's like a dream come true. You are so lucky. Myra Bassett, who was 80 if she was a day, pressed her hands together and rolled her eyes toward the flat-screen TV above my front counter with what I could only describe as a rapturous look. The show of choice right now was the super-popular cable soap opera All the Days of Tomorrow, and at the moment, the 40-inch screen was filled with the image of a tall, handsome, blonde man, shirtless, embracing a very pretty brunette wearing a lacy bra and a skirt that was practically non-existent. The cast and crew of the show were set to arrive tomorrow for 2 weeks to do a location shoot in my hometown of Cruz, California, and I'd campaigned along with several other local venues for the honor of catering the food for the shoot's duration. My competition had been in the food business a lot longer than me, so no one was more surprised than I was when I'd been notified that the specialty sandwich shop I'd inherited from my mother, Hot Bread, had been deemed the winner. Especially in light of the fact that I could count the times I'd actually seen the show on one hand. Nan Webb, the curator of the Cruise Museum, handed my assistant Molly a crisp 20 for today's breakfast special, the Preston McClintock, of course, named in honor of my new catering gig, which in actuality was a ham and cheese scramble on a toasted bagel and medium coffee. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Myra," she said. "Everyone knows Nora inherited her talent for cooking from her mother. I'd have been surprised if she hadn't won." Myra leaned both elbows on my counter. "I hear Amos Green was particularly upset." Amos managed Chomps, a deli at the other end of town. She gave a loud sniff. "I don't see why he should be, though. His grilled corned beef and Swiss on rye is good, but it can't hold a candle to yours, Nora. Especially those mini pies you make. They are so good." I laughed. I'm sure Amos wasn't the only one upset. It's going to be a lot of work, true, but there's a lot of money involved. And as caterers and crews go, I'm pretty much the underdog. "Oh, piffle." Myra waved her hand dismissively. "You couldn't be an underdog if you tried, Nora Charles. Anyway, everyone in Cruz is pretty excited. We've never had anyone from Hollywood film anything here, ever." "I'll tell you who's not excited," I remarked with a chuckle. "Our estimable head of homicide, Dale Anderson. She was in here yesterday complaining about the streets they want her to close in the wee hours of the morning for filming. They were very specific about wanting police guards cordoning off the shooting area to prevent spectators from disrupting the filming." As I said this, I couldn't resist throwing Myra a sidelong glance. I had no doubt that given the opportunity, the feisty senior would make every attempt to catch a glimpse of her favorite stars. "Well, with Tom Maloney and Ben Halloran both on sick leave, our crew's PD is a bit short-handed," Nan admitted. "Still, the TV crew's presence here should be a boost to the crew's economy." "Maybe not. The way I understood it, their shoot schedule is so rigid, they have hardly any free time to browse in our shops. A few of them are staying at the Cruise Inn, and some have private trailers out at Sweeney Park. As a matter of fact, the first few days of filming are out there." "Oh, that's at least a half hour from here." Nan clucked her tongue sympathetically. "How will that impact your catering?" "The director told me they're setting up a special commissary tent at Sweeney Park with state-of-the-art appliances. I had to fax him a list of supplies I'll need. He promised me a fully stocked kitchen, not only there, but at all the shoot locations." Myra beamed like a schoolgirl and clasped her hands in front of her. "After this, Hot Bread is going to be even busier than it is already. Oh, and by the way, Preston is going to be on this shoot, right?" "Oh, really, Myra?" Nan said, rolling her eyes. "Nora doesn't watch the show every day like you do. You have to tell her the actors' names, not the names of their characters." Myra's bottom lip thrust forward in a petulant pout, and I could tell from the set of her jaw she was ready to argue with Nan. "It's okay," I said quickly, reaching into the middle drawer and pulling out a list. "They're cross-referenced on here. I guess they figured most fans might refer to the actors by the roles they play on the show. Myra shot Nan a triumphant look. "See that?" she chortled. "The TV people know how we fans think, all right." I scanned the typewritten list and looked up at Myra with a smile. Mark Emerson, the actor who plays Preston McClintock, is listed. There are some others here that might interest you, too. Artis Malone, Emily Van Horn. Yes! Artis's character is Preston's current flame, Rachel Potts, and Emily plays his ex-wife, Eva. Myra's sullen expression softened, and she rubbed her hands together in anticipation. Wow, that should be good for a cat fight or two. Frankly, he should have stuck with Eva. I don't know what he sees in Rachel. No? I think it's pretty obvious. Nan laughed and pointed toward the TV screen, where the brunette had shed her bra and miniskirt, and was now sprawled in a provocative pose across the bed, clad in only a towel. Snorted Myra. That's just sex. Won't last. She regarded me over the rims of her glasses. Who's directing? Henry Bourne, I hope. He almost always has Preston take his shirt off. I ran my finger down the paper again. Looks like you're out of luck on that score, Myra. They've got Anton Forbes and Kenny Colgate down as directors. Anton Forbes, really? Nan leaned over to peer at the paper. When did he join the show? He came on about 3 months ago, supplied Myra, when Benton Griswold retired. I heard they wanted him bad. People magazine said they paid him a buttload of money to do it. She gave Nan a baleful stare. If you were a loyal follower, you'd know important facts like that. I saw the color rise in Nan's cheeks and decided to head off a possible explosion. Aiming my most disarming smile at Nan, I asked, "You're familiar with this Anton Forbes's work, then? He's done stuff other than television?" "Oh, yes," Nan nodded. "He started out in movies. You know, those schlocky little horror films. And then he graduated to more artistic films." She named 2 films that I knew had been nominated for awards. He's really come a long way these past few years, but I can't help but wonder, if it hadn't been for what happened with Dean Harriman. Whatever else Nan was about to say was drowned out by a loud meow. A second later, a large black and white cat lofted onto the back counter and fixed all of us with a golden stare. "Meow," he said again and cocked his head. Nan looked across the counter and giggled. "Looks like someone's not interested in our movie star gossip. Or maybe he is." The cat raised one black and white paw and waved it toward the ham on the counter. Then he started to purr loudly. I chuckled. I think Nick's just hungry. I broke off a piece of ham and walked over to the bowl in front of my refrigerator. I shredded the ham into several pieces and dropped it in. Nick jumped off the counter and padded over to the bowl, and a few minutes later, the sound of contented slurping reached our ears. Myra laughed. "He certainly likes to eat." Yes, it's hard to say which appeals to him more, food or a good mystery. The tubby tuxedo cat, formerly known as Sherlock, whom I'd renamed Nick, after Nick Charles, since my name is Nora Charles, it was sort of a no-brainer, had appeared on my doorstep one night, and after some coaxing from my BFF Chantal, I'd adopted him. At least, I think I did. It might have been the other way around. I still wasn't quite sure. Nick's former human, a PI who coincidentally was also named Nick, has been MIA for over a year now. I credit him with not only my kitty's flair for detective work, but his penchant for spelling out words with his favorite toy, Scrabble tiles. "Yes, he's almost as talented as you in that area," Nan said with a chuckle. "Is he going to go along on the shoots?" "That's a definite no," I said firmly. "Nick will stay here. Chantal, my sister Lacey, and Molly are all going to rotate accompanying me and running hot bread, so there will always be someone around to keep an eye on him." Nick looked up from his food bowl and bared his fangs. "Meow," he said, and then returned to his slurping. Nan laughed. "I think he's trying to tell you he doesn't need a babysitter, or maybe he wants to hear more about Dean Harriman." She laughed as Nick's head jerked up, and he turned his golden gaze toward her. "I think you'd be interested too, Nora. Dean was Forbes's—" Whatever information Nan was going to impart was interrupted as Myra gave her sleeve a hard tug and pointed to the television. "We're missing the best part of this show. There's an empty table right in front of the TV, too." She turned to me and peered over the rims of her glasses. "Well, good luck tomorrow, dear. If you get a chance, I'd love Preston's autograph, or a napkin of his, or a plate he ate off of. Really anything he touched will do. Or better yet, if you can get your hands on something he wore, that would be even better." She closed one eye in a broad wink, then glanced over toward the door and let out a sharp breath. "Oh, great, here comes Doris Johnson. Come on, Nan, we've got to grab that table before she hogs it." Myra snatched up her tray and gave Nan a push toward the table. As the two women hurried off, I found myself pondering just what I might find so interesting about this Dean Harriman. I felt a tug on my apron and looked down into Nick's furry black and white face. "You're curious too, aren't you?" I glanced toward the register, where Molly had Doris Johnson's order under control. "Let's take a little break." Nick gave a loud meow and trotted off toward the back table and my laptop. I booted it up, clicked on the mouse, and a website selling designer shoes appeared, a sure sign that my sister Lacey had been on it earlier. I glanced longingly at a pair of to-die-for Louboutins in a plum color that cost almost an entire day's worth of hot bread receipts, and then heard a soft thunk as Nick lifted his portly body onto the chair next to me. "Let's see what Google has to say, shall we?" I typed Dean Harriman into the search engine and hit enter. A few seconds later, a plethora of articles popped up. I selected the one marked "Director Dies in Freak Accident," and a few seconds later, a news article from the LA Examiner filled the screen. "A director with a promising Hollywood career died yesterday in a freak accident on an LA movie set. Dean Harriman, 48, died Friday afternoon from a gunshot wound to the head. According to witnesses, Harriman was demonstrating how a suicide scene should be played. He took what was believed to be an empty prop, put it to his temple, and fired. The blank cartridge did not penetrate his head, but there was enough blunt force trauma to shatter a good-sized piece of his skull into his brain, causing massive hemorrhaging. Harriman was rushed to LA County Hospital, where emergency surgery was performed. He was pronounced dead at 9:25 Friday night. Police are investigating." I clicked that article off and pulled up another one, dated a few weeks later. "Director's death ruled horrible accident. Police have ruled the recent shooting death of director Dean Harriman a horrible accident. Harriman, 48, was demonstrating to actors how to play a scene when he put what he thought was an empty gun to his head and pulled the trigger. According to eyewitness reports, Harriman didn't wait for the prop master's approval, just grabbed the gun to demonstrate. Apparently, there was one blank cartridge left in the chamber, which is what killed Harriman. After a thorough investigation, Detective Andrew Rizzoli of LA Homicide has officially ruled Harriman's death accidental. He was quoted as saying, "There is no evidence to suggest any foul play. Mr. Harriman's death was the result of his own carelessness." And yet another article entitled, "Harriman Protégé Named as Successor." Anton Forbes, Harriman's protégé, will assume directorial duties on The Mysteries of Maya, effective immediately, said Michael Parkerton, head of Light One Studios. "It is a terrible tragedy, but in the best show business tradition, the show must go on. We have every confidence in Anton turning out a quality product." The photo that accompanied all three articles depicted a smiling, brown-haired man who looked to be in his late 40s. The last article also had a photograph of another man with dark hair and eyes, looking extremely serious as he bent over a young girl, ostensibly giving her direction. I assumed that was Forbes. I clicked on a few more articles. Some were interviews of other actors Harriman had worked with, and some were the comments of family members. All attested to the fact that Harriman sometimes acted rashly and without thinking. The general consensus was that Harriman had indeed acted rashly, as he had many other times before in his life. In this instance, however, it had cost him dearly. On the surface, it seems like a case of accidental suicide, but suicides aren't always what they seem, right, Nick? Nick cocked his head and let out a loud meow. I leaned over to give him a scratch on the white streak behind his ear. Let's think. Who stood to profit the most from Harriman's death? Nick's paw snaked out, tapped the screen where the article on Forbes taking over directorial duties was still on display. Forbes is the logical choice, I agree. I typed his name into the search engine and stifled a gasp at the number of pages that came up. There were easily over 100. I narrowed it down a bit by typing in Anton Forbes, Dean Harriman, and got considerably fewer. I clicked on a handful and found them all to say mostly the same thing. Harriman was considered an eccentric genius, and though Forbes was talented, many felt he lacked Harriman's drive. Harriman had plucked him from doing horror movies and taken him under his wing. They'd worked together on 2 prior projects, both of which had been commercial successes. Every article ended with the same sentiment. Harriman's untimely death had given Forbes's fledgling career a much-needed boost. I started to close the computer, but Nick's paw shot out, covering my hand. Meow. You think I should search a bit more? Okay. Finally, at the bottom of the 9th page of results, I found an article entitled, Dean Harriman, Casualty or Calculation? It had been written 2 weeks after the director's death by a reporter named Millicent Martin. The gist of the article was that Harriman, although brilliant, had made many enemies in his life. Had someone decided to end it prematurely? There was a reference near the end to Forbes's good fortune at his mentor's demise. A veiled reference, perhaps, to a motive? The last line of the article was particularly interesting. Rumor has it Harriman was set to reveal something stunning about one of his co-workers. Unfortunately, or is it conveniently, his lips are now forever sealed. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my temples. Nick, sprawled next to the laptop, looked over at me, his golden eyes wide. Well, there was a police investigation, and they couldn't find any evidence to indicate it was anything other than an accident caused by Harriman's carelessness and ego. Aside from this Millicent Martin, everyone else seems to agree. That last line of her article is particularly interesting, right? I wonder what Harriman was going to reveal, and about who. I bet this Millicent Martin thought it was Forbes. Nick cocked his head, and the corners of his lips turned down. Then he jumped off the table and disappeared underneath. A few minutes later, I heard the familiar sound of Scrabble tiles being batted around. I lifted up the edge of the tablecloth just as the tiles came flying out. I picked them up, laid them on the table, and started to move them around. A few minutes later, I stood back and surveyed the word I'd spelled out. Bogus. A word that meant something not genuine. A phony. A sham. I heard a loud meow from underneath the table. It seemed my kitty definitely thought there was something off about Harriman's death. Fine, Nick. If I had to be perfectly honest, something didn't strike me right either. It was almost as if the death had been a bit too pat and terribly convenient for Anton Forbes, particularly if he'd been the object of Harriman's big reveal. I'd been an investigative reporter for too long to just turn my back on what seemed to be a good mystery. I heard a loud tap, 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 and shifted my gaze to the rear counter. Nick had wriggled out from underneath the table and had leapt onto the counter. He stretched up on his haunches, tapping his claws at the frame that held my newly acquired PI license. Okay, fine, I muttered and punched a number into my cell, that of Hank Prince, my former informant from my Chicago reporting days. If there was anyone who could dig up dirt buried deep, Hank was the man. This is Hank Prince. I'm not available to take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as I can. Hey, Hank, I said. Nora here. Can you do me a quick favor when you get some time? No rush, but I need some information about the death of a director named Dean Harriman. Also, anything you can find on a director named Anton Forbes, and any suspicious deaths he might have been associated with. It's, for a possible noir story. Thanks. Well, I wasn't lying. Noir was the online true crime magazine I wrote for part-time. Since acquiring my license, I'd written a few articles on becoming a PI, which had proven to be a big hit with the readers. But I'd no doubt that an article on an actual investigation into a mysterious death by a fledgling PI would have both readers and my editor salivating. I hung up and glanced down. Nick squatted by my feet. He lifted his head, and I swear his kitty lips parted in a smile. "Happy now?" I asked him. "We'll see what, if anything, Hank can scare up. And if he doesn't turn up anything suspicious on either front, it's a dead issue, okay?" "Meow," said Nick. Then he turned around, tails straight up, walked over to the refrigerator, turned around twice, and lay down. I sighed. It couldn't do any harm to see what, if anything, Hank might turn up. If there was one thing I knew from experience, it was that when it came to crime, Nick's premonitions were nothing to sneeze at. Chapter 2. I woke the Tuesday morning to a rough tongue licking my cheek. I winked one eye open and saw Nick sprawled across my chest. I turned my head and opened my other eye to look at my clock, then sat bolt upright, a motion that caused him to slide off my chest and onto his back across my comforter. 3:45, I groaned. I'd set the alarm for 3:30, but it hadn't gone off. I scrubbed both hands across my face, then glanced over at Nick, who'd righted himself and was now washing one black and white paw. "Thanks, buddy," I said, swinging my feet over the edge of the bed. It wouldn't do to be late on the first day. "Meow," said Nick, his tail straight up in the air, his kitty equivalent of "you're welcome." He shifted his position slightly and raised one paw toward the end table where my cell phone lay. I reached over, picked it up, and checked it. I let out a long sigh. No messages, Nick. None from Hank, and none from you-know-who either. Nick padded over to me and butted his head against my arm, a sympathetic gesture for a cat. He knew I was talking about Daniel Corleone, the handsome FBI agent I'd been dating. A few weeks ago, Daniel had sprung on me the news that he was being sent on a top-secret assignment to London. The mission, if handled successfully, could result in a big promotion for him. The downside was he'd be virtually incommunicado for at least 6 months, possibly longer. Before he left, he told me that he didn't want me to feel tied down, and if I wanted to date anyone else while he was away, he'd understand. I had the feeling, however, that he'd made that offer because he didn't think he had any competition. I myself wasn't sure if he did or not. Damn that Leroy Sams. I'd first met Sams in college. We'd worked on the college paper our senior year, and even back then our personalities clashed. We were the quintessential oil and water mix. Fast forward 18 years to last year, when my sister Lacey was accused of the murder of her art professor. Sams was her arresting officer, and we'd butted heads on that case too. Although in the end I was convinced he had a sort of grudging admiration for my detective skills. Sams had since left homicide for the FBI, and he now had Daniel's former job as head of the special task force based out of nearby Carmel. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a spark of something between us, only I had yet to ascertain just what that spark was or how deep it went. And since Daniel was temporarily out of the picture, both my sister and Chantal had been egging me on to find out. But did I want to open that Pandora's box? I might, except for another minor complication. Our current head of homicide, Detective Dale Anderson. She and Sams shared a past, and I got the impression Dale would have liked to share a future with him too. How did Sams feel about either of us? Your guess is as good as mine. I jumped off the bed so abruptly I startled Nick, who let out a sharp meow. I gave him a lopsided grin. Sorry, pal. I shouldn't sit here and agonize over the state of my love life, or to be more accurate, my lack of one. It's best to concentrate on what pays the bills, right? Nick narrowed his eyes at me, then with a soft murp began the tedious process of washing every inch of his sleek black fur. It was hard to tell just what sort of a statement that action was supposed to make. I stumbled into the bathroom, washed my face, brushed my teeth, and ran a comb through my auburn locks. Then I walked over to my sister's bedroom door, knocked briskly, pushed the door open, and stuck my head in. Rise and shine. You've got the morning shift at Hot Bread today. Be ready to open at 6 a.m. Lacey lifted her blonde head from the pillow, stretched and yawned. I still think Chantal rigged that coin toss, she grumbled, her eyes still closed. I wanted to go to the location shoot the first day. Really? I cocked my brow at her. Then you should have gotten up an hour ago. She opened one eye to stare at me. You only just got up, she accused. Yes, but that was only because my alarm didn't go off. The eye closed again. Whatever. I leaned against the door jamb. I've got the ingredients for today's special in the fridge, and I made up the signs last night. Jeff Peckham will probably be right outside the door when you open, so make sure he gets his extra bold decaf and raisin bagel. And Steve Hoggensmith will probably be early today too, and he likes— Oh gosh, stop. Lacey sat up, rubbed her eyes, and then tucked an errant curl behind one ear. I get it, Nors. I know all your regulars and what they like. Everything will be fine. I know that, I said, but my tone lacked conviction, and we both knew it. Look, even you have to admit my work ethic's undergone a dramatic change the past few weeks. Finding out the guy you've always thought would be there won't be will do that to a gal. I knew she was talking about Lance Reynolds. He was actually my old flame from our school days, and was now the owner of Cruise's premier and only tavern, the Poker Face. Lance had always maintained a gigundo crush on my sister, up until a few months ago, when he'd developed an interest in another woman. Suffice it to say that although my sister was definitely not the type to want to settle down, she hadn't taken the news well. She seemed to be adjusting now, but quite honestly, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Lacey must have sensed my misgivings, because she shot me a mischievous grin. Hey, I'm moving on, okay? I'll take a page from your book. You've got the right idea. The next man in my life is going to be a lovable furball like Nick. Say, I've got an idea. Nick can help me wait on your customers. Good luck with that, I said and laughed. Oh, and about Nick? He likes the yellowfin tuna, unless you've got some lobster salad special left over. Then you can give him a small bowlful of that. Be sure you keep an eye on the doors front and back. Nick's pretty quick, and he doesn't like being left behind on anything. She put her fingers to her lips and simulated a yawn. Nora, I know how Nick is. Don't worry. I'll keep an eye on him. Like you kept an eye on Mr. Chips? Lacey's face darkened. For God's sake, I was 14. Yes, and Mrs. Crandall trusted you with her pedigreed poodle, which you left tied up in the yard in the middle of a rainstorm. If I hadn't happened along, that dog might have gotten pneumonia. Geez, she grumbled. I screw up one time and you never let me forget. I folded my arms across my chest and put what I hoped was a stern expression on my face. Just make sure you keep an eye on Nick. I'm not kidding. He can slip out the door like that. I snapped my fingers. Yes, I've seen him in action. We'll keep him occupied so he won't be missing you and want to chase after you, okay? She glanced at the clock, groaned, and then slapped her palm down on the snooze button. Don't worry, she said, pulling the sheet up to her chin. Everything will be fine. Hot bread will be fine. Nick will be fine. I'd like to say you'll be fine too, but since you don't seem to be able to make a decision... Oh, please don't start in on my having to choose between Daniel and Sam's again, I murmured. Between her and Chantal, I was hard-pressed to decide who bugged me the most about it. My sister's expression was one of wide-eyed innocence. How do you know that was the decision I was talking about? Because it's the only one you and Chantal ever talk about. Lacey shrugged. Have fun today. Who knows, maybe your dream man is neither of them. Maybe you haven't met him yet. Maybe he's on that set. And with those words of wisdom, she buried her head in the pillow and motioned me with one hand to shut the door. I pulled her door shut with a confidence I didn't really feel. Dependability was never one of my sister's strong suits, but right now I had no choice but to trust she'd get through the morning rush okay. Comforted by the fact Molly would arrive around 6:30, I returned to my room to finish getting ready. 20 minutes later, I was dressed in jeans, t-shirt, and white smock, and went downstairs to Hotbread to admit my BFF and co-caterer for the day, Chantal Giard. She was dressed in an outfit similar to mine, except her smock was pink, and she wore a scarf in pink, fuchsia, and violet tones, wound through her cap of black curls. She stepped through the door and threw her arms around me in a giant bear hug. Chérie, this is très excitant, no? Chantal loved affecting a French accent, maintaining the attitude that it lent her an air of
Sample complete. Ready to continue?